Hi everyone, Sarah here. And after looking at your sketches and starting to take a look at your rough drafts for Project 2, I have three overall suggestions for you, and consider this your feedback for Project 2. However, I am more than happy to talk with you one-on-one about your draft, and you can always get extra credit by talking with me about your work and posting some notes in Slack. So keep that in mind. Okay, let's see, I hope I can start this presentation. There we go. All right. It's all the end. Okay. Well, there's what my presentation looks like. Okay. I used a Google Slides template from Slides Carnival that I really love because it offers a lot of separate layouts for different slides, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But here are my Project 2 revision suggestions. First, to simplify, I see a lot of you working, you've done so much research, right? So when you get to this visual argument, you're like, I want to include all of this information. And it can be hard to figure out which direction to take it, how to hone your focus. But remember, simpler is better for a visual argument. So simplify. Two, direct. You need to know and you need to be able to have like an elevator pitch. Like, who are you trying to convince to do what? And why, right? So that is the crux of an argument. You're trying to convince a particular audience to take a particular action. So if you're not quite sure what your goal is, your persuasive goal is, figure that out and come back to the drawing board a little bit. Lastly, I have a lot of questions about how you are incorporating evidence and referencing your research and citations and things like that. And I want to just tell you that for this project, it's most important to make sure that you're focusing on your ethos so that your argument seems credible to your particular audience, right? Does this mean citing some sources? It probably does. But you want to do that mindfully and you want to do it with your audience in mind. So I have some tips on how to do that. Okay, so one, simpler isn't always easier, as I mentioned. Make sure your textual components are brief and direct. A great way to ensure that you sort of stay on track and you don't get distracted trying to add a lot of different elements in is to work from a template. Okay, so your St. Martin's guide, your St. Martin's handbook offers this particular advice. I think it's really important, so I'm going to read it to you. Before you create a text in a genre that is new to you, it is a good idea to look for an available design template. You can use them to familiarize yourself with conventional elements and layouts for the genre, and even if you decide not to follow the template settings for color, font, etc., oops, I need to go follow that quotation. It's still going to be helpful for you, right? Have you already found a useful template for Project 2? A few of you have, but if you haven't, note that you can find Google Slides templates like this on Slides Carnival. That's linked at the end of this presentation. You can find examples for infographics on Pictochart and Canva, and you have the document of potential digital poster resources that was shared from the assignment sheet and in Slack, but I wanted to link it to you here so you wouldn't forget that it's there, right? So you have, oops, it's just taking me away from Slack. All right, it's gonna think for a minute. All right, well, you have that document, okay? Here we go. Here are two examples of persuasive infographics from Canva. And I went through all of the infographics on canva.com just because that's the platform that I use most when I'm creating things for my students to promote my book, etc. And a lot of the infographics were really beautiful, but they weren't all persuasive. So I went and chose two that were persuasive. So one is technology's impact on child development. So it's making a persuasive case that technology does impact child development, and it's showing you how. So that there is a persuasive context to that one. There's an even more specific persuasive context to this second example here. 5 reasons to give to charity. So I've linked you to both of these examples. I just uploaded them to our Google Drive, but I want to go over what's working here and why they're effective. Okay, so number one, the text is in both examples are brief and organized, right? Yeah, there is some description and smaller text, which is hard for me to read directly on the Google Slides. I'm going to have to get close. But it's kept within a certain a limitation, right? And the voice for this text is really specific. So another thing that your textbook suggests is that you keep, so this is a great way, like working with a template like this would be a great way to think, okay, like what are the 5 different reasons for XYZ to happen? Do I want to include 5 reasons? How would I use a visual icon to subtitle one reason, right? And then what would the text be to go along with that subtitle? Then, okay, I do want to give some more information about what I mean. So, how is it giving to charity? How, in what way is that commemorating love? This does not tell us because this is an infographic, but this is the space and it gives you kind of a guide for how much text you would want to include there, which is not over much, right? I bet if we looked at the word count for this infographic, it would be, man, it would definitely be under 150 words, right? So succinct. So brief, organized texts, they feature a hierarchy. So there's the title, and then subtitles, title, subtitle, 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 then paragraph. Here it's a little bit different. It's organized differently, correct? But they're using contrast to give that sense of what's related to what. And the visuals are numbers based. So then the subtitle is really, so there's the subtitle is really this, right? Parents satisfied. It's the description of the description of the data. So 86, this is the number that does this. 72, these are the amount of parents concerned with this. 15, this is the amount of parents who do not blah, 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 right? And I love, so another thing is like, if you look at a few templates, it gives you some ideas. Like maybe I do want to use a quotation from the doctor who conducted this study. Maybe that really will convince my particular audience to consider XYZ. And then you have this template, like this sort of layout already figured out. So you could include your quotation, who said it, and give a brief explanation of why that quotation is important to your argument. Okay, so brief, organized text, thoughtful contrast. These are great examples of that, right? And careful alignment. Maybe the biggest benefit to working with a template is that you don't have to figure out, like, is this organized quite right? There are guides ready to help you snap things into place. So, for instance, when I was working on um, this presentation, and I'm like, okay, is this like, is that, does that look right? Obviously that doesn't look right. But instead it's like, oh, there are the guides, right? I want it to be in center. There we go. And the more elements you have on the page, the harder it can be to work with a layout like that, right? Did I get it? I had it a little more spaced out. So having a designer a graphic designer whose job it is to make the layout even, organized, and effective. Like take that work, and cite it, but make use of the templates available to you. Okay. Brief, organized text. Don't say too much. Thoughtful contrast. Not a lot of colors. You guys have talked about this a lot in your discussions. Careful alignment. Make use of the templates. Number 2, know who you want to convince of what, right? You worked through project 1, so many different voices, so many different arguments. Now it's time for you to really pick one specific persuasive context. And easier said than done, right? And a lot of you in your sketches have an idea, but it's not quite figured out yet for a lot of you. You haven't quite figured it out yet. So here's an example. Hey, fellow volunteers, imagine somebody in your target audience finding this infographic that you've created online and sharing it. Who would they share it to and why? Hey, fellow volunteers, did you see this cool infographic I found? Please share it with your potential donors as it will help convince them to donate to our charity, right? So in this case, the sample target audience makeup, I wrote nonprofit volunteers here, but you might even think um, about revising that toward potential donors for nonprofit volunteers to share with. That would be up to you. But so maybe you're writing to nonprofit volunteers. Of course, there are other audiences. There's me and your classmates. There's anyone interested in charitable giving. But don't get too sidetracked by anyone interested in XYZ. Like, that's not a specific audience. You want to think professions, you want to think demographics, you want to think global locations. Like, who would you literally email this to? or who would be interested in finding it if you posted it online, and who would likely take that and share that with who? Okay. Three, consider your sense of credibility. You should cite sources or reference particular scholars by name if it's appropriate for your chosen medium and genre. Now, this is something that a lot of you are worried about, because, and rightfully so. How how much do I need to use my research? And how do I make sure that I'm using it thoughtfully and according to all academic guidelines? Here are my suggestions for you. One, don't overdo it. Your audience does not need to know all of the research that you've done. I know you're proud of it, but that was the background work that you've done to then make this visual argument. Do cite studies, 1, 2, maybe more if it's an academic audience and you're doing, like, a presentation like this. Do cite studies that underscore your argument's credibility. Like, "Here's how why you should believe me. I have done my research. It's not just me saying this, it's XYZ." Hyperlink your resources if possible. If you're not sure how to do that in an infographic or using like a Google Slides, figure it out, and just Google how to hyperlink in Pictochart. Okay, and next, if you are not sure whether you made it, if you're concerned that would that you have cited information, that it didn't make sense to use the scholar, if you're concerned at all, let me say this, then just include a separate references document in your submission to D2L. I'm not requiring it, but it's good practice if you have any concerns. I hope that based on your research and your experience in English 101 and 102, you'll make it really clear where you're getting information from. But a separate references document could be useful for a lot of reasons. So, not required, but that way you don't have to worry about cramming a lot of citations into your infographic or whatever you're making itself, right? So don't overdo it. Do cite studies that underscore your argument's credibility. Hyperlink resources if possible. And if you think you've hyperlinked all of the resources that you've used in a really like awesome organized fashion that's easy for your audience to engage with, you do not have to include a separate references document. But if you have any concern, just do it. You already have the APA citation list from Project One. It won't be a difficult thing to add. And you can just submit that to D2L as a separate document. So you would just upload 2 documents. Okay. Um, don't forget, your peers have answered a lot of thoughtful questions on the assignment sheet and gone through connecting reading to the assignment prompt. And that's really helpful if you're feeling like you need some more guidance. Go back to that document and look around and see what reading your peers found helpful. Also, you can ask any questions you might have about this presentation on Slack for 5 extra credit points. Sound great? I hope so. All right, I'm leaving. So here's where I got this template, and this is a credit page that the template designer just left for me, so I can use that. I'm going to leave the following slides here, so you can get a sense of like all of the different visual organization and tools that you can make use of if you're working from a template. Okay, but this I didn't write these, obviously. Okay. All right. I hope that was helpful. Bye.